Martin Sheen had a heart attack and had to crawl half a mile to get treatment. However, it was kept under wraps for years because they were worried that the production would be shut down at the studios, and the financiers found out that their lead actor had suffered a heart attack and almost died on set. Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now is regarded as one of the greatest war films in American cinema history. However, it was plagued by several years of insane production hell, but eventually he finished his masterpiece and dropped it in 1979.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Raiders of the Lost podcast, as you all know. And today we're doing one of the greatest films ever made, hands down, Apocalypse Now. This is an extraordinary film. And then I'm watching it again last night. I just couldn't help but be amazed at what Francis Ford Coppola accomplished. It's so extraordinary. It's one of the greatest pieces of directing in the history of film. When you look at the scale of it, the scope of it, the nitty-gritty details of the hell, the landscapes of where they actually shot this, and the actual shoot and production mayhem, it's a miracle that he pulled it off. He put a lot of his own money into this. He put $7 million of his own money. Back in the 70s, it's a lot of money into this film. And it actually was a 3-year edit. That's how intense it was. They shot 330 hours worth of film, which is insane. And I was just watching this. I've seen this many times, but last night I was like, how on earth did he pull this off? He did. And he is one of the greatest filmmakers ever. He did Godfather, Conversation, Godfather 2, and Apocalypse Now. What the hell? Are you kidding me?
Maybe the best run in the history of film.
I can't think of a better run than that.
He's up there for sure. I mean, Denis Villeneuve has had a terrific run the last 10, 15 years. Nolan had a great run. Tarantino's had a great run that's never ended for a lot of those guys. But Francis Ford Coppola's run in the 1970s is absurd because there's some of the greatest films ever made. 3 of them regarded in the top, I think, 20. I think Apocalypse Now, it's an 8.4 on IMDb.
Nice.
And its number on the user rating list for IMDb is listed at number 54, which is wild. But the other, he's got 2 in the top 5, which is absurd.
I would put it in the top 25 of all movies.
Of all time, I'd put it up there too. I think that's a safe assessment. Dropped and released in 1979, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, written by Francis Ford Coppola, John Milius, and Michael Hare. IMDb, like I said, it's an 8.4 with over 700,000 user reviews and ratings. Rotten Tomatoes, Apocalypse Now is a 98% critic score. That's insane for a war film. 94% audience score on a budget of $31 million. It grossed $104 million at the box office. It won 2 Oscars for Best Cinematography and Best Sound. It had 8 nominations in total. It was the winner of the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival and also won 2 BAFTA Awards, including Best Director for Francis Ford Coppola. Off of $9 million, like Anthony said, he invested $7 million of his own money into the film after it went severely over budget. He eventually had to mortgage his house and Napa Valley Winery, Coppola Wines, to finish the film. However, because of all this, in addition to nobody wanted anything to do with Apocalypse Now, even though, you know, Coppola's the hottest filmmaker in the world, coming off the 2 Godfather films in The Conversation, winning 5 Academy Awards in the early to mid 70s, nobody wanted to be a part of this film. But he owns it completely because of that. So he owns us all. However, the financing and loans he had to take out for this film had an interest of 27%.
Oh my God.
On the dollar.
On that much?
Insane.
In the film that won Best Director, Robert Benton won for Kramer versus Kramer that year. However, I think that, that's an all-time drama, but Apocalypse Now, it's regarded, and accurately so, as one of the greatest things ever. And what he did with this entire setting, there's so many elements to this film. You get this really interesting opening, then we get some war, we get some action, then we get the travel up on the river, and then we finish with the third act of this really spiritual journey of encountering Kurtz. And it's just a fascinating film. There's really nothing like it. You can't compare it to anything. You can compare it to other Vietnam War movies and other war movies, but it still is very much like a beast of its own. And actually, it's quite different from the novel in the fact that in the novel, Willard is actually hired to rescue Colonel Kurtz. However, in The Heart of Darkness. However, in the film, Coppola changed it to Willard is tasked with killing him. So
also the book, it takes place in Africa, not in Vietnam.
It was actually written in the 20s, I think, either the 20s or 30s. So it's actually a very old novel, not set in Vietnam. And usually the American military will help with war pictures by loaning vehicles, equipment, gear. And there's a lot in this film. There's so many helicopters, there's so much firepower in this film. However, because of the change in the mission of an American soldier being tasked with killing an officer, the American military refused to give anything to the production. So Coppola and his team actually had to loan out all of the gear, vehicles, and everything from the Vietnamese military.
No, not Vietnamese.
I'm sorry.
They wanted to film in Vietnam, but there's a war going on at the time, so they didn't film in Vietnam. They filmed in the Philippines, a country that had a bunch of U.S. military gear and weaponry, vehicles, helicopters, everything, weaponry. And also that ran into another problem with them where the Philippines were in the middle of a civil war. So sometimes the helicopters, they had to be taken for the day to go bomb or participate in a battle during a civil war, which is insane. But that's why they filmed in the Philippines.
It's because Saigon had fallen when they were looking to film it there.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can't really film a movie in the middle of a huge war.
Well, ironically, George Lucas was first tapped on to make this film.
Well, actually, I have a great timeline I wrote out.
Oh, let's hear it.
So I have a timeline that includes all this stuff, and it's about basically the production hell that it went through. But a quick synopsis on the film.
Let's hear it.
In Vietnam in 1970, Captain Willard, played by Martin Sheen, Martin Sheen, takes a perilous and increasingly hallucinatory journey upriver to find and terminate Colonel Kurtz, played by Marlon Brando, a once promising officer who has reportedly gone AWOL and mad. In the company of a Navy patrol boat filled with street-smart kids, a surfing-obsessed air cavalry officer, and a crazed freelance photographer, Willard travels further and further into the heart of darkness.
Dun, dun, dun.
Now, obviously, this was plagued in one of the most horrific productions ever done, I think. Of all the stories you hear about reshoots and just things that happen on set, this is up there of all time. So
yeah, it almost killed him. Do you know what the original shooting schedule was?
It was just going to be not 60 days, right?
It was going to be 6 weeks. That was what they originally scheduled with the studio.
The first shoot?
6 weeks of filming.
Well, I'll explain what happened. Holy crap. So first of all, the script went through 10 different rewrites. So John Marillis, the screenwriter, he wrote 10 different versions of the script before they went to production. George Lucas, like you said, was attached and eventually was scouting locations, but then went on to make Star Wars instead.
So George Lucas, he actually wanted to make it a mockumentary, and he wanted to film it during actual war areas with like a documentary style feel. That was his plan.
What's great about that is Coppola has a cameo in Apocalypse Now as a filmmaker on location of a war. Keep running past the camera.
Keep going.
Keep running past the camera. So Coppola stepped in and began developing the film in 1974 because he was very intrigued by it. However, like I said, nobody wanted anything to do with this project after George Lucas dropped out.
Also, sorry, Orson Welles was the first director ever attached to the film. He wanted to make it as his first film, and the studio was like, this is going to cost too much money. And so they're like, give us another script, and he gave them the script for Citizen Kane.
Like Anthony said earlier, Coppola approached the U.S. Army, who turned him down because of having it a mission where you're killing an officer of the U.S. military. Shot in the Philippines, like I said, because they had to use U.S. military and choppers and vehicles, which they had access to there. Francis Ford Coppola originally approached Steve McQueen, Jack Nicholson, Al Pacino, and Clint Eastwood to be the star of this film. Eventually, Harvey Keitel was signed on and cast as Captain Willard in Apocalypse Now and even went to production. But after a few weeks of being there, he quit due to creative differences, and Martin Sheen was flew in quickly to replace him last minute.
Also, Al Pacino refused the role because he said, I quote, I know what this is going to be like, Francis. You're going to be up there in a helicopter telling me what to do, and I'm going to be down there in the swamp for 5 months.
It's way worse than you could have imagined.
And then Coppola said, Al Pacino would have starred in the film if we shot it in his New York City apartment.
Jack was right. It's actually way worse, though. Now, a couple weeks into production, what happened was a typhoon hit the Philippines and destroyed most of the sets that were built start filming. So they had to basically scrap everything, rebuild everything, already 6 weeks behind schedule and millions of dollars over budget because all of their sets were destroyed. And because of this, much of the crew and some of the cast just left. They abandoned the project and went home to the United States. They're like, I'm done. This is a bad sign. Let's get out of here. We've been here for 2 months and we haven't even filmed anything.
Oh my God.
Then Marlon Brando eventually showed up 6 weeks late, hadn't read the script or the book, and was very overweight for the character. And that's why most of his scenes are shot in darkness, because Coppola's trying to hide how big he had gotten for the role.
And Colonel Kurtz is actually written in the novel as being tall and lanky, whereas Marlon Brando was actually only 5'7", and so he was just very stout.
Brando's only 5'7"?
5'7".
Wow.
Doesn't he look big on screen?
He probably must wear lifts or something.
He's always looked massive.
I can't believe
Yeah.
he's 5'7"?
5'7".
What?
So, but they filmed this perfectly. There's actually a great Italian cinematographer who did a bunch of great Italian films.
Vittorio Storaro.
Yeah, so
He's a 3-time Oscar winner.
He was Bernardo Bertolucci's cinematographer.
Yeah.
And so they filmed it, and they made Marlon Brando look massive in this movie. Like, he looks like he's 6'5". He's just a monster in this.
I always thought he was 6 feet or something like that. Wow, I can't believe Marlon Brando's 5'7".
So Martin Sheen and him are both like about the same height, but they made
Brando looks
Kurtz
enormous.
look huge. Yeah,
He looks enormous in this film. Now, moving on to some more plagued things that happened on set. So Brando shows up. Not only did he show up late and hadn't read the script or book, he refused to learn his lines and improvised pretty much everything that you see on camera, except for the quotes of the T.S. Eliot poems, especially the horror. Those were all planned, obviously.
But a lot of what you hear was actually recorded from an 18-minute improvised take of him talking in that temple. And one of the sound designers said that they used 2 minutes of that actually in the film, and it's a lot of what he says is just this. He went on a rant for 18 minutes, and the filmmaker said,
"Oh, when it's him when Willard gets there."
Exactly. So they said a lot of it. They said half of it was nonsense, but then half of it was just pure brilliance, and they ended up using 2 minutes worth of that dialogue that he just said on the scene.
Also, like I said, there was a civil war happening in the Philippines, so battle sequences were very difficult to pull off because sometimes the Philippine armies would have to request their choppers to be called away for real battles, so they couldn't film those days, which is insane. Cast and crew were abusing drugs and alcohol regularly. Specifically, Martin Sheen was going through a mental breakdown. He was abusing alcohol immensely. Dennis Hopper's in this film. He was having trouble performing in his scenes, and he basically, Francis Ford Coppola asked him, "What do you need, Hopper? What do you need, Hop?" He's like, "I need an ounce of cocaine." And so Dennis Hopper performed his scenes, clearly high as a kite in every scene, but pulled it off. But cocaine was rampant on the set of this film for cast and crew.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug. And so for the freak out with Martin Sheen, so what happened was Martin Sheen told the crew in the hotel room to let the camera just roll.
So he's talking about the opening scene.
Yeah, so he said let the camera roll. Sheen was really drunk. He punched the mirror for real, which was real glass, cut his thumb open, and then he began sobbing and actually tried to attack the director during that scene. The crew was so disturbed that they wanted to stop shooting, but Sheen insisted they keep the cameras going. At that time, he was fighting a drinking problem as well as other personal issues, and he got so caught up in the scene in his own inner struggles that all of this chaos actually happened. And he actually said after the fact that continuing the scene helped him face his problems. And in an interview with him and Coppola, they said that like it was a big impact on him as a person to like get that out of him. And so he's covering his face with blood. That's real. That's all just, he told him to roll the camera. And you can actually see when he goes on the ground, he's completely naked, but he does cover up his genitals for like at the last second. So there's a little bit of awareness of him in there, but the whole scene was just him doing his own thing.
He was going through a real mental breakdown and a real bender. Yeah. And basically, like they said, they rolled the camera. It's absolutely insane.
Want to hear another crazy Martin Sheen thing?
Well, hold on. Let me keep going through this because that was on this list. So let me get through this thing right here. So I got some more on this timeline. Next up, so let me catch up. So I left off with Hopper and an ounce of cocaine. Brando and Hopper did not get along on set, and Brando refused to be on set at the same time as Dennis Hopper because he didn't appreciate his unprofessionality. So Marlon Brando thought that Dennis Hopper was unprofessional. So all of their scenes, they have a couple together, were shot separately at different times where they couldn't be on set together. Real dead bodies were used from a local morgue at the temple and the third act of Apocalypse Now. This was obviously a horrific thing to do, and police came and they took the passports of all the cast and crew as well as all the bodies back to be put back because they weren't from a local morgue. They found out they were from grave robbers.
What?
Grave robbers.
What the fuck?
Sometimes Martin Sheen, when he was on this insane bender, was being replaced by a body double. Sometimes it was his brother, Joe Estevez, who also did a lot of the voiceover narration because even after the film happened, Martin Sheen was unavailable for reshoots as well as voiceover narration, which wasn't part of the original script, but after the second round of reshoots, Francis Ford Coppola, when he was editing this for 3 years, added narration and voiceover from the character Willard, and Martin Sheen was very busy. He was unable to perform the voiceover, but he has a brother named Joe who sounds exactly like him. So Joe Estevez does a lot of the voiceover narration in this film, as well as was acting as a body double for Martin Sheen for some of the film because Martin Sheen had a heart attack and had to crawl half a mile to get treatment. However, it was kept under wraps for years because they were worried that the production would be shut down if the studios and the financiers found out that their lead actor had suffered a heart attack and almost died on set.
They told the studio it was heat exhaustion instead of a heart attack.
Crazy. Now,
Emilio! He wasn't available.
After filming wrapped, Coppola went back to the United States. So the cast and crew, they were like, oh, we're done. Finally, thank God we finished filming Apocalypse Now. But after putting the film together, Coppola realized we have to go back to the jungle. We have to reshoot again. So after a year, they went back to the Philippines to reshoot, which was supposed to be 60 more days of filming. It turned into 230 days of extra filming, which is absurd. Because of this entire production, Francis Ford Coppola lost over 100 pounds from stress, had a seizure, a mental breakdown, and became suicidal multiple times.
So the reason for the reshoot was, since they were shooting in the Philippines, there were no film labs in the Philippines. So they weren't able to get any dailies. Now, dailies, like we said,
so they couldn't see what they were looking at.
Exactly. So they weren't able to see their footage the next day or even within a week.
That's ballsy.
So what they filmed it blind. They filmed the entire thing blind. And so all the film was just constantly being shipped to America, and it was never getting shipped back after being processed at the lab. So Coppola didn't see any footage until he came back to California a year into shooting. And then when they went through all the footage, that's when they realized we need to do a lot more work because they weren't able to see what they were filming because there was no kind of film lab situation or industry at all in the Philippines or in Southeast Asia at the time.
They also didn't really have an ending. They didn't really have an ending once they got all the footage together. And so Coppola's like, we have to go back and figure out how to end the movie and redo the third act, basically.
Wow.
That's insane. I didn't know that they couldn't see what they were filming.
No film lab. No dailies.
Holy crap. Also, let's see what else we got here. Like Andy said, it was about 2 to 3 years of editing this film, which, I mean, I spent a day editing an episode. I'm like, all right, when is this over? Imagine doing 3 years of editing on the same project. Eventually came out in 1979. And to quote Francis Ford Coppola in an interview after the entire production, everything came out and all the drama was released, he said, we had access to too much money, too much equipment, and little by little, we all went insane. And there were multiple crew mutinies as well. And I'm sure this is just the stuff we got told about.
There's a lot in the documentary Heart of Darkness.
Yeah, that's a really cool doc. I saw it a couple years ago.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff in there. And I mean, this movie, it's insane that they even pulled it off. What's also really specific about this film is there's no credits. So if you notice when the film ended, if you watch it on Netflix and a couple other streamers, there's no credits, just a copyright logo at the end of the film.
Oh, yeah.
Coppola didn't want any credits at all.
It went right. I was watching it and it went right to the next up.
And you actually only see the title in the film. It's graffiti written. It says our motto, Apocalypse Now.
Oh my God, I never noticed that.
That's the only time you see the title, and then there's no credits at the end or in the beginning. So it's like a rare film where there's no pre-roll credits or post-roll credits whatsoever at all.
It's a great title for a movie as well, and it was actually inspired by a button badge popular with the hippies during the 1960s that said Nirvana now. Goddamn hippies! Hippies! It's a private road!
Private road!
And the legacy of this film is immense. It went on to obviously be one of the greatest American films ever made, movies in general ever made, in a part of a stellar career from Francis Ford Coppola, who's for some reason often gets left out of Best Director of All Time lists.
I know, right? Isn't that wild?
Even though he made arguably 3 of the best ever.
Maybe because he hasn't made that many movies in the last 30 years?
I think that's probably why.
Yeah.
In the 1970s and 80s, he was the guy, but the last 10, 15, 20 years, not a ton of movies. I think that's a good point.
He's actually the main reason. Obviously, he has a connection to the Doors. So
is that why he opens it up with it?
Yeah, so the Doors, their music is so synonymous with this movie, and in a way, it acts as like the score for the film because so much of their music is used in the film, and also like created this like, I've always connected the Doors to Vietnam because of this film. You know what I mean? And I think maybe another film might have used a couple of their songs as well, But Francis Ford Coppola actually went to film school at UCLA with all of the members of the Doors.
Oh, no way. They went to film school?
Yeah, and so Jim Morrison agreed to let Coppola use the masters of their music for the film. And the 5.5-hour early assembly cut was scored entirely using just their music before any score was written. So he edited the film initially to just their music. So that's why the Doors are used so often.
Yeah,
and actually, ironically, Jim Morrison's dad was an admiral in the Navy.
During Vietnam?
During Vietnam, and he actually ordered missions in Vietnam. Isn't that
wild.
crazy?
That's pretty wild. But, like I said, the legacy is timeless. This movie's going to be an all-timer forever. And Roger Ebert considered one of the finest films on the Vietnam War and included it on his list for the 2002 Sight and Sound poll for the greatest movie of all time. In 2002, the Sight and Sound Directors Poll of the Greatest Films of All Time was ranked number 19. It is on American Film Institute's 100 Years, 100 Movies list at number 28 all time, but dropped to number 30 on their 10th anniversary list. Uh-oh.
Oh.
What else do we have? AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movie Quotations included I Love the Smell of Napalm in the Morning as number 12 of all-time movie quotes. In 2006, the Writers Guild of America ranked the screenplay by John Milius and Francis Ford Coppola as the 55th greatest ever script. It is number 7 on Empire's 2008 list of the 500 greatest movies of all time, but it's probably way off it now. We've seen Empire's recent lists. I think they probably have Guardians of the Galaxy ahead of Apocalypse Now.
No offense to Guardians.
They re-ranked it number 20 on their 2014 list of 301 greatest movies of all time. And then, oh, wait, here we go. It bumped even further down to number 22 in 2018.
That's still high, though.
Yeah, still high.
I mean, still low.
Let's see what else we have. So
That was an unsubscribe. We always mix that up,
Yeah.
saying high instead of low.
The Guardian named Apocalypse Now as the best action and war film of all time. In 2016, The Hollywood Reporter ranked it 11th among the 69 winners of the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. The New York Times included it on its best 100 movies ever list. Entertainment Weekly ranked it as having the 10 best surfing scene of all time in cinema. One of the best surfing scenes ever.
With the bombs.
It might actually have the best surfing scene ever in cinema.
It's the most ridiculous one.
And
for
there
sure.
are 4 different versions of this movie. We have the original theatrical cut. Then there's actually a work print that you can watch. It's a 5.5-hour cut. It's not technically a movie because it's pretty much
It's the assembly.
every bit of footage that you could access and someone put it all together, and it's called a work print edition, and basically the assembly cut. There's also the 2001 Director's Redux, and then the 2019 Final Cut, which
That's the one.
Francis Ford Coppola was heavily involved in because people weren't happy with the Redux, and then he stepped in 2019, made the Final Cut to fix the Redux.
Well, Apocalypse Now is actually mistakenly talked about as something with a film that was changed because of studio interference. Now, there are plenty of films historically that have been forced to make edits because of studio interference. Like Blade Runner is a prime example. However, the cut, so people thought for years that the theatrical cut wasn't Coppola's cut, but it actually was. He was actually the main producer and funded a lot of the film, and he preferred that cut when they released it. Like, he made that. He cut out that much footage because he felt it was stronger for theaters. Ended up being dissatisfied after the fact. Then he put in 49 extra minutes for the Redux. And then after a few years after that, he was like, I think I went a little overboard with that. It's not as strong anymore. And I've seen it. And there's like a whole sequence of a farm. Was it a tobacco farm, I think? And it's really slow. It doesn't quite work. It doesn't quite fit in the film. And then with the Final Cut, he cut out 25 of those new 49 minutes, and it's a trimmer cut. And I believe he cut out the entire farm sequence that he put in on the Redux. And so the Final Cut is what Coppola considers his final version of the film.
yeah, and, I still prefer the theatrical cut. I've seen the Redux. I have not seen the Final Cut, but I've seen the Redux and I've seen the original.
Yeah, it's like they have lunch at that estate with the wealthy people. It's cool, but I watched the theatrical cut last night. It's actually great.
It's awesome.
It's fantastic.
It really is great.
And I gotta say, I can't believe this film didn't win editing Oscar. It's one of the best edited films I've ever
I
seen.
mean, the opening scene. It might be the best opening scene I've ever seen in my life.
So the cinematography by Vittorio Storaro, and then they had 3 editors. 3.5 years of editing. I'm sure they couldn't contractually have an editor for that long because they're moving onto other projects. So Lisa Fruitman, Gerald Greenberg, and then Walter Murch were the 3 editors of this film, and Coppola heavily involved in the editing as well, just not credited. So it took them so long to edit it, but the editing really is that's something that stood out to me on this newest rewatch. I was just like, the editing of this film is unbelievable. It could be the greatest editing ever done in cinema. And then the combination of both the cinematography and the editing of this film is pure magic. And there really, truly is nothing like it. And like you said, the opening is so strong because we get that long shot. It's about 2 minutes of the tree line with that yellow smoke. And it's just so visually striking.
Yeah, it just saturates the palm trees, and it's beautiful, but also tragic and horrific. And it seems like we're in this jungle, this oasis, but then it turns to hell.
Then we get the napalm strike, and this is actually footage that they didn't use in the film. He never planned to do this as the opening, but they had so much footage, incredible footage of the fires and the explosives that he's like, what if we open with this? And so you see the tree line just get obliterated with fire. And then that's cross-cut and cross-dissolved with this incredible cinematography of Martin Sheen's Willard in his hotel room, going mad, sweating, and we get these incredible panned close-ups of his face dissolved and superimposed over the burning trees. And then we get the cross-dissolves with the fan of his room acting like the propellers of the helicopters, and the sound design is really incredible. The sound design is like the first 5 minutes we just hear these, it's like
we hear war.
Yeah, we're at war, but we hear the propellers of helicopters, but there's some effects on them, and they sound very distorted. And
with the guitar riffs,
yeah, with the guitar riffs, and then it's just like that entire editing sequence of the dissolves, of these superimpositions, Martin Sheen, the fires, the trees, the landscapes, unbelievable, and it's just like jaw-droppingly beautiful.
Yeah, it's an incredible way to open the film. I think it's insanely powerful. It might be, like I said, the best opening scene in the history of cinema. We get pretty much a strong sense of what this movie is going to be like. This character who, even though he's not in the war, he's not in Vietnam right now. He's in Saigon, actually. He can't leave the jungle. He's stuck there mentally. He's stuck inside the jungle still.
Yeah.
He's got so many great voiceover work here. He says things like, I'm still only in Saigon every time I think I'm going to wake up back in the jungle. I'm still waiting for a mission. When I was there, all I could think about was getting home. But then when I was home, all I was thinking about was when I can get back. And he wants a mission. He's waiting for it. He's going insane. He's going through madness, like we were talking about earlier. This is really Martin Sheen having a mental breakdown, but his character's having a mental breakdown as well. And I love how they said I eventually got what I want. They brought me a mission, and they served it to me on a silver platter.
They deliver it like room service.
Yeah, deliver it like room service. They come to get him. And, Captain Willard, we eventually find out, he's such a great character. He's got this addiction to war. He's got an addiction to the jungle, to the calamity of men, to death, to devastation, to the horror that Kurtz talks about. He's addicted to it. He can't be away from it any longer.
Yeah, like he said that whenever he goes home, he can't wait to get back into war. And so he's got this addiction and attraction to be in war, and it's really stunning. We see that a lot in a lot of wartime films nowadays, that psychological trouble of trying to you can't fit into the normal world anymore, normal society.
And one of the best shots of the movie is during the dissolves, and you're talking about how they're superimposing the footage of the explosions and the fire of the forest in the jungle with Martin Sheen, the close-ups of his face. There's one where he's lying down before the montage ends, where he's just smoking a cigarette in his bed, like looking up at the ceiling fan, and then there's fire inside of his head, basically. Yeah. And it's just, obviously, it's clearly a metaphor for the inside of his brain right now. His mind is a mess. His mind's at war still.
It's got to be one of the most interesting opening 5 minutes of a movie ever. And there's really no story at all. It's no plot happening. But once that's over, especially like the first time you watch this film, you're like, I am hooked, and I am in, strapped, ready to go.
The movie's got a great story. He's a captain. He has a great rap sheet in terms of basically being a solo special forces agent in a lot of ways. He's an assassin. He's taken out people for the CIA. And obviously when he's going to get interviewed basically by the general, Harrison Ford's there in the scene as well. They're going through his rap sheet and everything he's done. They're asking him questions about his work, and he denies everything ever happening. And also, if such mission existed, I wouldn't be allowed to talk about it. So basically, we're learning that he's an assassin for the army and for the government.
Yeah, and this is a great scene. We get a lot of Coppola regulars. And so the general of this scene, does he look familiar to you when you watch this movie?
He looks wicked familiar.
He's the senator in Godfather 2.
Oh my God, that's what it is. I didn't look it up the other night when I was watching.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is this fucking
Senator
guy
in Godfather 2.
who tries to muscle Corleone?
Yeah, tries to blackmail him, yeah.
Yeah, he tries to muscle Michael.
Yeah. It's amazing. And then
We don't like your kind around here.
and we obviously get an early Harrison Ford role, who actually named his character Colonel Lucas after George Lucas, who gave him his first big shot with American Graffiti.
Yeah, and the thing is, this was filmed before Star Wars.
Yes.
So this came out in 1979. However, Harrison Ford wasn't a successful actor yet. We've talked about this before on the show. He was an actor struggling to get consistent work. He was in some stuff here and there. He was in American Graffiti. He was in this. But he's also working as a carpenter. And that's eventually, he obviously knew George Lucas. And he was building some shelves for George Lucas at his house. And George had him read lines as Han Solo for actors and actresses that were coming in to do reads and to audition basically for Star Wars. Then eventually he's like, you know what? Why don't you be Han Solo?
Be Star Wars.
But this was after he had filmed Apocalypse Now. However, this came out several years later. It came out in 1979, even though he probably filmed it in 1976.
Yeah, he looks so much younger.
Because Star Wars was 1977. He filmed this in 1976. So he
Yeah.
filmed this before he filmed Star Wars. So it's a common misconception that Harrison Ford was a huge star. But it obviously helped the movie because people were like, Harrison Ford's in this. Why is he only in one scene? It's because he wasn't a star when he filmed it.
Yeah, and he's great in his role, and I love the editing of this scene in particular because this is the scene where they inform him about the initial information about Lieutenant Colonel Kurtz, just Colonel Kurtz. Sorry, the Lieutenant Colonel is the other character, and so they play that recording of Kurtz's insane ramblings, and then we learn you can tell the general is disillusioned and grief-stricken about what's happened to his friend. The actor does a great job of showing that on his face and in his tone of voice, how he's saddened by what's happened to clearly a man he's known for a very long time, and said he respected him so much. But then during these insane ramblings, they cut to like close-ups of the food and the prawns. I mean, and this was made in the 70s when Americans weren't as cuisine interested as we are nowadays. They weren't trying that many foods. And
We weren't even eating avocados here.
It's just cheeseburgers and pizza here. So
hey, there were other things.
Okay, there are.
We had steak, Anthony.
We had steak too, but like prawns were like a very out of place thing for Americans. So to show that the food and the Vietnamese cuisine interlaced with the dialogue of Kurtz on the recording, I found it to be just very fascinating editing to even do that as a director and cinematographer, to even make those decisions. It's really great.
And we learn a lot about Colonel Kurtz throughout the entire film. This, we get our first information from it, but throughout the course of Apocalypse Now, Willard's narration is him studying the files that he gets, both from the initial interview here, as well as later on when the boat he's on gets their mail at the shithole of the world, basically, is what they call it, where they get mail, and he reads more classified information. And basically throughout the film, we learn a lot of things about Colonel Kurtz. He was an outstanding officer. He was in Special Forces, but that led to his mental break. He has an absurd pedigree. He's third-generation West Point, the academy. He's a Harvard graduate. He has 1,000 decorations. Sometimes good does now prevail. Why did I write that down? That's something that...
That's what the general says.
The general says that, yeah. So I wrote that down.
Sometimes bad wins, and then sometimes.
Well, I look at the
win.
general as a very hypocritical character, and obviously a representation for just war.
Yeah, I mean,
and the hypocrisy of he thinks he's in the right because of what they're doing in Vietnam.
Willard has that great line: "Is how do you charge someone with murder in a place like this?"
Exactly. Now, Colonel Kurtz has a perfect career, almost too perfect. However, he was being set
I have
up.
an immaculate record.
Immaculate record. Most people don't trust people with immaculate records. I have an immaculate record. It's outstanding.
It's outstanding.
Now, he was being groomed eventually to become a general. He was a riser. He was one of the smartest people in the Army. And at 38, he rejected everything he was about to get and requested airborne to return to Vietnam. Now, airborne would be just basically in infantry. You were being demoted, basically, and you're going to go on the ground. Now, this was a shocking thing for someone to do, not just who's already an officer, but someone who's 38 years old. And Martin Sheen's voiceover, Willard, says that I did it when I was 19 and it almost killed me. It kicked the shit out of me going to airborne, going through just the training. But he does it at 38 years old. Obviously, an insanely motivated and hard individual.
Why the fuck would he do that?
He gave up on this career. And then once he was back in Vietnam, he started going AWOL. He started basically doing his own missions. And there was a big controversy with the Army where Colonel Kurtz goes on this AWOL mission and kills people and achieves a goal that the military needed for the Army. However, he was not authorized to do it. But because it was such a success, they couldn't really do much about it. They couldn't really punish him. But then he eventually stayed, and he basically created himself as his own army, his own god to these specific local people in Vietnam and Cambodia. And now he's operating as his own authority, as his own god in this world.
And he's executing people as the judge and executioner as well.
But it's a great hypocrisy for the entirety of the war and the U.S. government or any major power at war where they're going after him for the actions he's doing when, if they looked in the mirror, they're doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, that's what makes this such a great Vietnam War film, for sure. And then this is when...
Well, hold on. Just real quick to stay on the Vietnam War aspect of it. I think a lot of people, when they look at Vietnam War films or war films in general, especially one like this, they might say that or think that it's glorifying war. This movie does not glorify war. It shows the devastation of war and how it destroys people and destroys lives. Like Coppola is not showing these sequences like destroying that little tribe and that little village for fun. He's doing it to show how horrible it is.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. So the Ride of the Valkyries song, it was actually written in the story. The whole story in the part of that song is actually the Valkyries riding to war just before they're defeated. And it's ironic. It's chosen ironically because America was defeated in Vietnam, and so that was the whole point of using that song, because it fit narratively with what they were trying to do with the film. And it's been, I mean, in the film Jarhead, it showed that like the Army likes to show it to recruits to get them excited and amp them up for wartime. And so it's a completely misinterpreted scene by probably a lot of people to think that it's like encouraging it and glorifying it and showing it as like entertainment, but really that choice of song was chosen for that reason, as a showing that it was related to America's even involvement in it right before their own defeat.
I completely agree.
Yeah,
I didn't know that's what the music meant.
Yeah.
Now, Willard is given a mission by the general and the intelligence officer to terminate the colonel. Now, normally this would not be a big deal for Willard, who's already killed people for hire. He's already been an assassin for the government, for the CIA. However, this is the first time he's been asked to kill an American, and not just an American officer in the Army. So he accepted the mission, basically because he just needed to get back into the jungle. He needed to go back. However, he even says in his voiceover, Willard, he wouldn't know what he was going to do once he found Kurtz. And he'll do the mission in terms of getting there, but when he meets Kurtz, he's not sure if he'll be able to kill him.
Yeah, he does call it a prime mission at first, but he is questioning the idea of, because he says he mentions he's killed like 8 men.
6 that I know of.
6 that I know of. Close, and they were close enough where I could feel their last breath. But none of them were American. And then being an American officer is even worse in his eyes. So he feels like he might be betraying what he even stands for by going on this mission in a way. But he does go on the mission because he needs to. He needs something to do.
He needs to get back into the jungle because he's addicted to war.
And then we meet the whole crew. And so Lawrence Fishburne is Clean, or Mr. Clean.
Mr. Clean. So this is the Navy boat that's taking him up the river.
Now, Lawrence Fishburne was actually 14 years old.
He's 14?
When they made this movie. He lied about his age. He lied about being 17. So they thought he was 17 when they cast him. But he was only 14 years old. And ironically, it actually suited because a lot of men who sign up for the military actually lied about their ages too. Mm-hmm. So it actually kind of suited the character.
That's wild. Then we have Frederick Forrest as Chef Hicks, who's a tightly wound former chef from New Orleans.
I just want to cook.
I just want to cook. There's a tiger. The tiger scene's crazy. He goes through a mental breakdown after that. Did you know that because of the a year break between the reshoots? So the scene where they just stop the boat for a little bit and Chef wants to go get some mangoes, and obviously Willard says, "Don't go alone, and I'll come with you." Basically, they're walking through the jungle to go get the mangoes, and then obviously while they're in there, they think they're gonna hear Charlie. Charlie is obviously Viet Cong or the communists in this film. That's what they would call him. They would call him Charlie, but instead it's a tiger that attacks them, and they get away from the tiger. And then they get back to the boat, and that's when Chef freaks out. He has a mental breakdown. I just want to cook. What am I doing here? So from the point of filming, when they filmed going into the jungle to go find some mangoes with the tiger, and then when they went back to the boat, there's a year difference in between filming that from the tiger to them being on the back to the boat when Chef's freaking out.
Insane.
A year in between filming.
Just within the same minute.
The same scene. It's insane.
That's unbelievable. Fucking year. You can't tell. You can't tell.
We also have Albert Hall as Chief Petty Officer George Phillips, who runs a tight ship, and he's the captain of the ship. The little boat, I would say, not exactly a ship. We also have Sam Bottoms, who's gunner's mate third class at Lance B. Johnson, a former professional surfer from Orange County, California. And that rounds up the crew of this boat that he's basically Willard's catching a ride on to get up north. They don't know that yet that they're going into Cambodia. They just think they're taking him up north on a ride. It's classified information where he's going and who he is.
He can't tell anyone what the mission is. And then we made the iconic Robert Duvall as Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore. He was nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor in this role, even though he only has 11 minutes of screen time in this movie.
He won the BAFTA.
He won a BAFTA?
Yeah,
wow.
for this.
Wow. And this is just an amazing performance. He just steals the scene, and you kind of miss him when they leave. You know what I mean?
He's a horrible guy, though.
He's a horrible... Yeah, but what a great performance.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's interesting because he's like this surf-obsessed kind of hippie, plays guitar, loves to hang out on the beach, and he's also the commanding officer that carries out horrible attacks and onslaughts and destruction on local villages on the coast.
I think that Colonel Willard is in this whole sequence of him, especially the attack on this small little village, is a giant representation of the United States in the war. You know, they try to bring him like their.
You mean Kilgore?
I'm sorry, Kilgore. Sorry.
Gotcha. I agree.
Colonel Kilgore is a giant representation of the United States in the war because they try to obviously bring their culture there. They're surfing, they're drinking beers on the beach,
steaks,
having a barbecue, as well as all they really care about is having a good time, in addition to just running amok all over this country. And they find that 6 foot peak surfing area, and that's when they go up and they take out that little village, which I think this entire scene of the village, the attack with the choppers, is a giant metaphor for the war in Vietnam. How quickly they take out this village with their immense firepower and how destructive they are. They slaughter people. They obviously lose some soldiers as well, but the leaders don't care that they're losing soldiers. All he cares about is his surfing, 6 foot peak. He wants to get down there and surf. But they're in and out basically, just like the United States were in Vietnam. They were there for several years, but once it was over, it's like, what was the point of this? Was this a futile event? Was this a futile war?
And all that's left is just fire and destruction. And that's what makes that whole Ride of the Valkyrie sequence so powerful is, first of all, the actual production of it is unbelievable. The cinematography, the editing. This is just like some groundbreaking stuff. Just the footage of the helicopters flying.
It's incredible.
It's unbelievable. And we get that great silhouette. There's like 14 helicopters flying towards us. Like I can't believe the organization of this movie, how they pulled this off. And then this sequence is huge. It's massive. They built this village and they destroyed it. And there's so much destruction. There's so much firepower going on. And there's so many vehicles and so many helicopters. And there's like every time there's a shot, even on the ground, there's a helicopter in the background. It's like unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Jaw-dropping.
And this film, actually, most of the dialogue is completely ADR because there was so many vehicles they couldn't hear anything. And so a lot of the film is all done in voiceover. Not voiceover, but voice recordings after the fact of filming. And this sequence, obviously, and all these helicopters flying around, you're not going to be able to hear anything when there are choppers that close. But then it's like it starts with like this entertaining opening, but then you see villagers running for their lives and then innocent people getting slaughtered. And then also you hear the derogatory terms that the American soldiers are shouting out. And you're like, this is becoming hell and becoming difficult to even watch. It really, the sequence takes a turn. You know what I mean? And it's really powerful, I think, in that regard.
I think so too. It's one of the most powerful scenes in the movie. And again, it's not glamorizing it. It's just showing how horrible it is because it happened. And you know what's going to happen right now is we're going to go to our superlatives.
Oh, yeah.
Then our intermission and take a moment and take a break and then get back to our episode on Apocalypse Now. So let's get into our superlatives. Anthony,
James,
who is the MVP of Apocalypse Now?
Francis Ford Coppola.
100%.
We're just pulling it off.
I can't believe he did this and didn't die.
He almost died.
He almost died multiple times.
He threatened committing suicide multiple times during filming.
I know.
It's crazy. Lost 100 pounds. Oh, my God.
It's nuts, man.
Can't believe it. No wonder why the guy doesn't make that many movies.
Can you imagine the stress involved with making this one?
Yeah.
Well, it also shows me that how everyone's been doubting his new film, Megalopolis. And he's like, bro, bitch, I made Apocalypse Now. Bitch.
I made that movie in the jungle.
They're like, oh, Francis Ford Coppola is wasting $200 million. First of all, it's his own fucking money. He can do whatever he wants with it. Also, he made Apocalypse Now. He pulled it off.
Technically, I helped fund that movie because I love the Coppola wine.
What, Apocalypse Now or Megalopolis?
No, Megalopolis. I'm a co-producer. I'm an associate producer.
You'd have to buy quite a bit of the wine.
I have purchased quite a bit.
I agree. So Francis Ford Coppola is the MVP, obviously, of Apocalypse Now. What is the best scene of the film?
I would say the Ride of the Valkyrie scene is the best. It's the most impressive piece of production I've ever seen, especially in terms of action. And also, like we were just saying earlier, it's extremely tragic and destructive and very powerful and resonant. And it's hard to even recover from the repercussions of that sequence.
It's hard to recover from this film after you watch it.
Yeah.
I think the best scene is the opening with Willard going mad inside of his house,
Great
as well
pick.
as juxtaposed and dissolved with the destruction of the jungle in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a sensational opening. It's mouth open like, I can't believe I'm watching this right now. Every time I see it. Mm-hmm. What's the best shot?
Actually, one of those shots of the opening, in particular, it's a close-up of basically straight on with Martin Sheen. He's on the left of the frame and superimposed with the silhouetted flames, burning trees. And I think it's the most beautiful part of the entire film. Like, that's the most incredible image of the entire cinematic experience. That shot in particular.
I think the best shot is during the Ride of the Valkyries of just the helicopters coming onto this beach. It's just mind-blowing.
Dude, the fucking POVs of the helicopters like shooting rockets.
But then when it's this beautiful beach, undisturbed, and these people who live there, they have a kinship with obviously the earth and their land and everything, but now it's about to be destroyed. But there's these helicopters flying onto the beach basically, just like 20 feet above the air. Mm-hmm. Shocking, terrifying, menacing. It's almost like gods of war arriving to your tribe or your village. Exactly, yeah.
It's almost like it's like the villain theme song approaching.
Exactly, yeah. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it, man. Who is the best actor of Apocalypse Now?
Marlon Brando.
Oh, you're giving it to Marlon.
Dude, once he shows up on screen, it's like, oh my God, this is insane. And I think he should have been nominated.
How do you feel about him not reading the script, reading the book, memorizing lines, and just improvising the entire thing?
Well, Marlon Brando is one of the most misunderstood actors. Do you know about the cue cards?
Yeah.
So there's plenty of behind the scenes footage of him in The Godfather, and there's a great shot of Robert Duvall in The Godfather, and he's got cue card on his chest, like taped to his chest for Brando to read. And Coppola never had a problem with it. So there's a great interview with Coppola talking about Brando, and he said that was just Brando's method. Brando believed that if you knew the lines, you couldn't accurately portray someone speaking, because when we talk, we're coming up with the words as we're speaking in real time. And so he felt that if you know the lines beforehand, you can't give a true performance. And so he preferred to have the lines on set without knowing them, cue cards everywhere. In every movie he worked on, this was his acting process. And that way, he didn't know exactly what he was going to say next, just like we do in a real conversation. We're just going with the flow and going off of each other. And so Brando liked to do that in his performance. So he never really memorized his lines ever. Probably maybe early in his career, getting his work up. improving himself, but definitely after he won his Oscar for On the Waterfront, I guarantee he never memorized his lines for any movie he was in. So that was his acting process. And so it really works. I mean,
But here he's not memorizing. He's not reading any cue cards. He's just making it up. Now, as a director, if I'm Francis Ford Coppola, I'm like, what the fuck, man? Can you just read some lines?
well, yeah, I mean, it was a crazy production before that. But again, when you're hiring Marlon Brando, you know you're in for fucking anything.
Yeah, you're getting everything that comes with him.
I mean, even hiring from The Godfather, the studio had to put out like $1 million of insurance on him. He was notorious for being crazy, like a crazy person to work with, and so in a way, it's kind of it's unexpected, but then also expected. But ultimately, I mean, his character works.
Yeah, it does.
And it wouldn't have worked if it was like a military officer. Like what it was written as in the book, I'm sure, because Marlon Brando is like, he's not even like human in this role. He doesn't even feel like a person. He feels like more than a human, more than a man. And everything he says, what they have in this film is absolutely extraordinary. The things he's saying, and I mean, there's so many things Brando did, like when he's with the kids, like he just asked them to bring the kids over, and he's like, I'm just getting to hang out with these kids all day, and they filmed that. Like that was never planned, and like just wandering around, just like touching things and using props, and that's just what Brando did, and he brought so much to it, and he added this incredible mystique to Colonel Kurtz that, you know, earned all of the buildup. It's 2 hours of buildup. You don't see him until 2 hours into this movie, except for a photograph. And it's also very striking where all we see is that portrait, the military portrait of him, very clean, very professional looking military man. That's all we see of him until the first reveal of him bald, wearing linen, and just like this like monstrous version of himself. So I think that contrast is just so brilliant. And really, the last 30 minutes of this movie is so special because of Marlon Brando.
There is another photograph. There's a silhouette of him, poorly lit, of him.
Yes, yeah,
more recent.
Yeah.
And you can see a bald head. But who is this? What is this figure? He looks like a mysterious god or something.
Mm. But Coppola was actually reading him the book in his trailer.
I gotta give you something. I gotta feed you something.
Yeah. But I mean, it works, man.
It does. It really
works.
does. I give Martin Sheen Best Actor. I think he's phenomenal in this movie, and I think Martin Sheen's just an all-timer, and this was a huge role for him, and he's a legend. You know, he's a legend. He's got a great. He's has an acting family. The Sheens, the Estevez. His first name is Ramon. His name is Ramon Estevez, Martin Sheen's real name. Changed his name when in the 1950s as he was becoming an actor to obviously try to get more roles because of prejudices. He's half Spanish. His father was from Spain. So he changed his name from Ramon Estevez to Martin Sheen for his stage name. Emilio Estevez's son, Capt Estevez as the last name. Charlie Sheen, whose real name is Carlos Sheen, took his father's stage name. And Joe Estevez obviously kept the last name.
Oh, very cool.
So it's interesting how
Ramon Estevez.
Yeah, his name's Ramon. It's legally still his name. He never changed it legally. It's a stage name, and he has come out saying that he regrets not going by Ramon Estevez early on in his career, and wish if he could go back in time he would. Mm-hmm. However, you could argue that maybe he wouldn't have gotten specific roles if it wasn't for the time is if you're a Hispanic actor you probably couldn't get many roles. Mm-hmm. So Martin Sheen's a very American
on paper
son.
He probably wouldn't even been put in auditions.
I know,
just
probably.
from on paper.
Probably. Now, what is the best line of the film?
My favorite line is actually a Brando improvised line. You're an errand boy sent by grocery clerks to collect a bill.
To collect the bill.
You're an errand boy sent by grocery clerks to collect a bill.
My best line is also a Brando line, and it's the last words that Colonel Kurtz speaks. He says it multiple times, but his final words before succumbing to his wounds given to him by Willard are, the horror. Then he dies.
Nice.
Thanks.
That's
a T.S. Eliot quote.
Yeah. I also have a couple of fun Letterboxd reviews if you'd like to hear them.
You know what? I think I would.
Nice. I'm glad. So Maria gave Apocalypse Now 4.5 stars and wrote, I love the smell of Marlon Brando inventing acting through 3 seconds of screen time and literally obliterating every other actor in the morning. Also named Bomb. Then Suspirlium gave it 4 stars and wrote, wow, Sofia Coppola's dad is actually pretty good at the whole making movies thing. I guess he takes after his daughter. Then Adam Bolt wrote 3 stars. Dude just really wanted to surf.
Dude just wanted to surf.
Number 1 Gizmo fan gave it 5 stars. Real patron. Real Letterboxd patron. This movie is pretty good.
Fucking Letterboxd, man.
Then Marjana gave it 5 stars and wrote, I refuse to believe that this lost Best Picture to Kramer versus Kramer. I just know Coppola was embarrassed too.
I mean, it obviously should have beat Kramer versus Kramer, but maybe in the 70s, people were sick of Coppola winning so many Oscars.
I mean, yeah, they can't give Michael Jordan the MVP every year.
Yeah, you have to spread it out a little bit.
I think that's a good point.
Because Coppola obviously winning 5 Academy Awards before he made Apocalypse Now, you know, they're probably like, oh, I can't give him every award.
Not another Coppola. Kramer versus Kramer is great, but yeah, this is
it's not Apocalypse Now.
This movie's also ahead of its time.
Way ahead of its time. How about now we'll head to our intermission and come back and talk about Apocalypse Now some more. But before we continue, the best way to support Raiders of the Lost Podcast is to become a patron at patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast. Why would you want to become a patron besides helping us support the show financially? You get awesome perks. You get weekly bonus episodes of the show. 2 every week. And also, I mean, the weekly chat, which we used to post publicly, is now only on Patreon now, which you can link your Spotify with as well and listen on Patreon and Spotify together, which is pretty cool. You can also get access to the ad-free version of the show. You can get access to our Discord. You get private episodes, custom episodes, private video thank yous, stuff like that, free merchandise. Our Patreon has so many cool perks, and we love to give y'all so many things. Because we appreciate you. I don't really know where I'm going. So
you're all over. You're off the rails,
man.
Brando,
and I'm just improvising.
You are off
everything
the rails.
I'm saying. The horror of people who don't sign up for a Patreon is immense. You can also sign up with the link in the description of this episode, or just go to patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast. Another great way to support the show is to leave 5-star ratings and reviews on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I know every podcast says it, but that's because it really does help us get seen by new people on these platforms and chart. You know, there's 4,000 other podcasts that have 2 white guys hosting it, talking about movies. We got to stand out.
Probably 1 million.
Fortunately, we're twins. We have that going for us. But we need your help. And yeah, it's probably 1 million of them.
No, talking about movies, it's probably 4,000.
Talking about movies, yeah. It's pretty accurate. I think that's right on the money. You can also support the show by sharing us. It's the best way for a show to grow organically is word of mouth. Share us on Instagram, on Twitter. We repost everything. Send us to your friends, your family members, anyone you know.
I thought you were going to say Fremens.
Anyone you know who loves war movies, loves Apocalypse Now, send them this episode. I'm sure they'll love it. Thank you so much for your support all around the world, everybody. Anthony's going to take it away with some sort of ad read. Go.
A little faster than that one.
You ain't got nowhere to be.
A little more direction than that.
You ain't got nowhere to be.
This episode, of course, is sponsored by our friends at movieposters.com, the #1 place to get your posters online today. Be sure to use our promo code Raiders10 at movieposters.com to get 10% off your order right now. Some of the coolest posters of all time are a couple of the Apocalypse Now posters. And if you want to get one for yourself or for maybe a fan of the movie that you know, be sure to go to movieposters.com. They have all sorts of sizes, framing, and even backlighting for your poster needs, as well as a selection of pretty much every movie and TV show in their poster library. They have high-quality prints, everyone. We got these all over our house and all over our set. It's the best you can get for your buck. So, for all of your poster needs, go to movieposters.com and use our promo code Raiders10 right now to get 10% off your order. Now, let's hit into our intermission.
Let's do it. The horror. Movie quote competition time. Are you ready?
Ready.
Girly, tough ain't enough.
Girly, tough ain't enough. $1 million baby. All right. Get up out of your chairs, open the window, stick your head out, and yell and say, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore.
One more time.
Get up out of your chairs, open the window, stick your head out, and yell and say, I'm mad as hell and I'm not gonna take this anymore.
Dead Poet Society?
I don't think you've seen this one.
I don't know, man.
Network.
Oh, Network. Moving on.
You should watch it.
I think I've seen it a long time ago, though. Guess this movie release year, Anthony. A Fistful of Dollars.
76.
Way off, man.
68.
1964.
Damn it. What year did Network come out?
1972.
76.
Same year as Taxi Driver.
Yeah, it won Best Picture.
It did?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's cool. All right, movie pop quiz time. Anthony, can you name 5 other Vietnam War films?
Shit.
There are quite a few, so I think you can pull it off.
Let's see. Platoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, but on the spot, I always forget fucking titles. Full Metal Jacket.
2.
Fuck. Let's see. Hold on. Shit. God damn it. Vietnam War movie. Oh my god. Forrest Gump.
3.
What was that?
3.
Vietnam War films. Oh my god, I'm blanking, man.
You're doing really well. You're doing well.
Born on the 4th of July.
4.
Fuck. Come on. I can do this. Think about war films, and then what's like war films with palm trees in it?
I mean, it's a good way to go about it.
Shit.
Oh. You got this. We believe in you, man. We believe in you.
Man, I don't know. I'm stuck.
I would have also accepted The Deer Hunter.
Oh, fuck!
Some other ones.
I just watched it.
I know, that's why you probably hate it. Hamburger Hill. We also have Casualties of War. Good Morning Vietnam.
Oh, my God.
Born on the 4th. Oh, you said Born on the 4th of July. Let's see. Coming Home from 1978. We Were Soldiers, the Mel Gibson film. Defy Bloods from Spike Lee.
Oh, yeah. Shit.
Tigerland, which is I think Colin Farrell's in that one. The War. Faith of Our Fathers. First Blood.
Oh, my God. Well, yeah, there's some flashbacks.
Yeah, there's some flashbacks in that. And some other ones.
Yeah, man.
There's quite a few.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Quite a few. But you did pretty well, man.
I did okay.
Last of Full Measure. We have Danger Close.
All right. We got it. This is
The Greatest Beer Run Ever.
We got it.
We have
All right, my quiz question.
Rescue Dawn.
Oh, yeah, I love Rescue Dawn.
Yeah.
All right, Robert Duvall co-starred in what 2 Tom Cruise movies?
Robert Duvall and Tom Cruise movies. That's a good question.
2.
2 of them. Huh.
He had to take off the coat for this one. He's taking the coat off.
Gotta focus.
Focus!
Getting a little warm in here, you know? I got this coat for free.
For me.
From you. You got it for free as well. So Robert Duvall and Tom Cruise movies. Rolling Thunder.
No. That's not what it's called.
Fucking...
You got the right idea, though. Rolling Thunder.
What's it called?
Is that like a sports team or something? What is that? Rolling Thunder.
What's it called? Fucking...
I can give you a hint. Thunder is in the title.
Yeah, fucking... the racing movie. Fucking... Something Thunder.
It's Days of Thunder.
Days of Thunder. Days of Thunder is 1. So there's another one, right? You said?
Yep.
There's 2.
1 of 2.
Robert Duvall and Tom Cruise. Is it the... Nah. I'm not saying The Firm, but it's my next guess. In the back. It's on deck. It's like right here. I'm not saying that's my answer right now, but while I'm thinking, I just want to throw that out there, and I want to see your reaction to me saying...
It's warming up right now?
The Firm is not my answer.
That's a guess.
It's a backup guess.
That's a guess.
It's a backup guess.
It's right.
The Firm is right.
No, it's not.
Fuck you. I said it was a backup guess. No, you lied.
It's not right.
All right, Duvall and Tom Cruise.
Come on, you know this. You know this.
Is it this century?
Yeah. Do you want a hint?
No. I do not want a hint. Maybe.
You want a hint?
Sure.
Your hint is sniper rifle.
Sniper rifle. Duvall, Tom Cruise, and a sniper rifle. Is it Jack Reacher?
Jack Reacher.
Who's Duvall and Jack Reacher?
He owns the shooting
Oh, yeah, the
area-
shooting range.
Yeah, he owns the range.
That's right.
Helps him out at the end with the
Oh,
sniper
God.
rifle. Takes out like 10 bad guys with a sniper.
That's right. I forgot that was Bobby.
Yeah, it's Bobby.
Good question. Good question.
Yeah.
All right, Anthony. Who we have for haters this episode? Any haters? Any unsubscribed?
We have one.
What are
We have
working with?
one.
We have
From
one.
our friend,
You have a friend?
since Alex Biscardi, all the way from Philly.
Alex.
Rare on our 2023. I made a clip about it being the best year since COVID happened. And Biscardi wrote, Rare Raiders L. This is easily the worst film year since 2020. Unsubscribe.
It's a pretty good year.
I think he was being sarcastic.
Talking Maverick didn't come out, but you know.
It's way better than 2020.
Yeah.
Like 10 movies came out in 2020.
We don't have a new review on Apple Podcasts, so we're going to skip that.
It's all right. We just recorded last night.
I
So
know, but you know, we would love some more reviews. We got to get those numbers up, rookie numbers right now. But my streaming recommendation is another Vietnam War film, which is on Max right now, starring Willem Dafoe, Platoon.
you just Ben Stiller trying she gets shot like 30 times.
Survive!
Survive.
I'm a lead farmer, motherfucker!
My streaming recommendation is Flight, starring Denzel Washington from director Robert Zemeckis on Max. It's a really good movie. Really good.
Now, let's get back into Apocalypse Now. And, you know, after Willard is with Kilgore and his escort, basically, his cavalry escorts, he's then with this boat. He was with the boat before, and they lifted it up, obviously, then dropped in the river further up. And now they're basically traveling up north, and they reach a couple destinations.
Oh, there's one thing we forgot to mention that I find like really horrific is that Kilgore places cards from a deck of cards on all
Death
the dead
cards,
bodies
yeah.
to as a signal to who did this, and it's just really horrifying part of war. And also the guy with his guts out was based on an actual true story of, he says the line, Kilgore, so he gives the canteen to that guy. So the canteen scene was actually based on a true event of a wounded Viet Cong fighter who fought while keeping his entrails strapped to his belly with a cooking pot. The incident was documented by photojournalist Philip Jones Griffiths, and the real U.S. soldier in the moment actually quoted as saying, "Any soldier who can fight for 3 days with his insides out can drink from my canteen anytime." So that was actually taken from a real event.
That's wild. So after the Kilgore sequence with cavalry and escort, they continue their journey on the boat. There's three really significant things that happen. The first one is the captain stops a boat and is sort of takes upon it himself to do sort of a routine check to make sure they're not smuggling anything. And they get trigger happy, and Lawrence Fishburne's character, Mr. Clean, unloads on them as they're going through the ship that Chef's searching, and kills everybody on board because one of the women was going for a barrel which had a little puppy in it. Really sad, tragic, and I'm sure things like this happen regularly in Vietnam.
It's awful. It's a tragic, horrible scene. And then Lance takes the puppy to take care of it.
And then the crew, as throughout the film, all of them are starting to lose it. Specifically, Lance.
Oh, sorry. There's another thing that happened in the aftermath of the beach sequence of the Valkyries. There's like destruction going on. There are helicopters flying everywhere. There's fire burning. There's people dead all around them. But then there's a priest carrying out mass for several soldiers, and they're actually praying and like they're doing the body of Christ and everything. That was such a striking juxtaposition of things.
And a Catholic church is being erected.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's that scene also reminds me, when I said earlier, it sort of feels like just one big metaphor for the war in Vietnam. It's so similar to Aronofsky's Mother, where the entirety of human civilization basically takes place in this 2-hour movie in this house. It sort of feels like that. The entirety of the war is shown like what happened in just this one scene.
Yeah.
And obviously just replacing culture with culture by bringing a Catholic church in there as well. And
this whole sequence, the river sequence, is like a whole other like chapter.
Yeah.
Of the film.
And as they're going, like I said, as they're traveling up this river, they're all losing their minds a little bit more and more, except for the captain. He's the one keeping it together. And they get attacked a couple times. One time they get attacked with bows and arrows, and then another time they get attacked with flares. It happens a little further along in the film, and Mr. Clean gets killed by the flares.
Yeah,
the
he gets
flare
the flare in the
attack,
chest. And
then the captain gets killed by the arrows. A spear gets thrown into his chest. But before their deaths, they make a pit stop at this bridge, which is also...
Well, you skipped the USO show.
No, it happens here.
Oh, I thought that Clean got killed after.
No, yeah, that's what I mean.
No, yeah.
I said their deaths happen a little further along in the film.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so further along in the film, that's when they die. But so going back, the first big stop is at this bridge, which is also basically an area that there are supplies.
Yeah.
This is where they get gas for their boat and everything, as well as they get offered tickets to go to the show. You want to see the show, and it's a USO show of Playboy Playmates come and dance for the soldiers, and it gets rowdy real quickly, and they have to take off and leave.
It was a real Playboy Playmate played the Playmate.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. I can't remember her name. But
Then,
this is actually based on a true story. There was a Playboy Playmate who was a performer in the 1950s for soldiers, and she was so beloved that she was made a certified GI by the military.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And then before Mr. Clean dies, and before anyone gets killed on the boat, they enter basically what's called the biggest shithole in the world, which is this circus sort of war zone bridge.
Well, first I want to talk about the USO show.
Okay, cool.
Before we move on to it. I think it's really interesting. And it's also scary because, like, they bring the girls in by helicopter. They, like, helicoptered them right onto the stage. And there's, like, hundreds of soldiers. Haven't seen an American woman in who knows how long. And it's, like, it's kind of scary. Whenever I see this film, I feel scared for the girls. There's all these guys that are just trying to, like, they would probably do anything to go run up on that stage, and they do.
What's being kept, though, there's barbed wire.
Barbed wire, and soldiers are guarding them from their own soldiers. It's just a really crazy situation. But also, like, I guess soldiers needed things like that to, like, let loose and to maybe be reminded of home. But whenever I see that scene, I'm, like, horrified for the girls of, like, oh my God, what could happen to them? And then the men do run on stage, and like there's a guy that jumps onto the helicopter.
Two of them. It's crazy
they're, like,
set piece.
They're dangling on the helicopter as it's flying away, taking the girls away. It's crazy.
It's a huge set piece. It's massive. They built that whole thing, man. It's wild.
It's just crazy that stuff just happened in the middle of the country.
Yeah. And then this is where they also, the next stop is where they get mail.
Yeah.
And Willard starts to get more information. So the next stop is like a horror movie where it's this basically sort of a no man's land. They stop at this bridge, which feels like a circus war. It feels like a hell.
Yeah.
A circus in hell. That's how I like to think about it, because of the weird circus music as well as the lighting. And basically this is a bridge that's constantly built and destroyed, built by the army, then destroyed by the Viet Cong, consistently back and forth, and it's kept open only so that what does he say? So that the U.S. Army can say that this is an open bridge, or it's open path.
Yeah.
But even though it gets destroyed, and obviously it gets destroyed as they're leaving, but it's terrifying because Willard's trying to find a CEO, trying to find a commanding officer, and he keeps asking everybody, and the first person he asks is like, ain't you? Aren't you the commanding officer?
Yeah.
You're a captain. And then everyone else basically tells him, like, doesn't answer him and says there is no CEO.
Yeah, and then there's that mortar fire guy, and he's
The grenade launcher.
Yeah, grenade launcher. They ask him, he just like smiles and walks away. But there's that crazy sequence with him where they hear a person screaming in the distance across the line, and then he just fires the grenade.
They can't kill him.
Yeah, and then silence. So there's like a confirmed kill. Like they stop screaming. Like that guy's dead.
It's wild because it's basically the Wild West. And this
There's no order.
There feels like hell.
Yeah.
And all the soldiers there, they look like they're in hell.
They all look like they've gone mad in a way.
And they don't last very long there, and they pretty much just get out without getting killed. And they continue their journey upriver. And then this is where the two deaths happen. First, Clean gets killed after they get the mail at that circus war zone hell. And unfortunately, Mr. Clean, he's listening to a tape that his mother sent him, and it's a very sweet thing. But suddenly they're attacked by flares on the edges of the river, and Mr. Clean gets one through his chest, and he dies, 17 years old, in the captain's hands. And the captain, he's devastated by it. And then the next attack is by arrows, and for the most part, they're not harmful. They're just a bunch of kids who made arrows, and they're not lethal. And even Willard tells the captain they're shooting. They're like, don't shoot the kids. They're just shooting. They're not harmful. They're just toy arrows. And then he stops, and then he gets a spear through the chest, and he dies.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then he tries to choke Willard.
Yeah, with his final breath, he tries to kill Willard. I think he tries to pull him onto the spear head.
I think, yeah, maybe.
He's trying to pull his face into the spear. Yeah.
And Lawrence Fishburne, I saw a Bradley Cooper Q&A recently. He's doing press for Maestro, and he said that he went to a Q&A of Lawrence Fishburne, and he said that Lawrence Fishburne said that after filming this movie, when he went home, he actually continued wearing his army costume to school because he couldn't shake the character and shake the experience, and so he wore his military attire for 8 months when he returned home.
Wow.
He couldn't get rid of the experience in his mind. I thought that was really interesting. There's also a sequence that's in the Redux that's not in the theatrical cut of when they do run into the girls during that rainstorm in that secluded bunker area, and there's a couple of officers there, and the girls are there too, and they each have a girl in a different room from the Playmate girls, and then Lance goes into the chopper with one of the girls, and he starts painting her face while she's talking about stuff. He's not even listening, but he's going insane. And he just starts painting her face, and then the other guys they're fighting over who has dibs on one of the other girls, and so that's a whole sequence that's in the Redux that's not in this theatrical cut.
Is it in the final cut? I wonder.
I think it is in the final cut. Yeah,
just trimmed
but
up.
It's not in theatrical.
But things are getting bad. But also before this, Willard confessed and basically let the captain in on some of the information, and he tells him we're going to keep going north, and then the captain says, that's Cambodia. He's like, that's classified. Then he eventually tells him, we're going into Cambodia, and I have to find an officer to kill. He tells Chef this afterwards, too, because the only ones left alive are Willard, Chef, and Lance as they approach and enter Kurtz's world or temple, whatever you want to call it, his village, his oasis, his own little sort of heaven to him, and he's a god here.
It's really fascinating, and they're coming up on the river, and there's all these natives just staring at them, and then there's an American, just photojournalist. So Dennis Hopper's character doesn't have a name. He's just called photojournalist in any casting list. Hopper's great. He's hysterical. He's like a much-needed personality in this film. This very dark film.
Yeah, I agree.
And he's kind of a light bulb.
He's the only person who smiles in this movie
exactly,
besides Clean.
Yeah, we needed that, and he's very entertaining. In the 70s, he was the hippie guy, especially with Easy Rider. That free-loving personality. He tapped into that really big in the 60s and 70s, and he taps into it in this film too.
Definitely not in Speed.
Definitely not in Speed, but he's necessary for this entire third act for helping us understand what's going on here. And he helps Willard learn that, Kurtz has built himself an army here. This is his oasis. These are his children. We're all his children. And there's really nothing you can do. And Willard's like, can I talk to Colonel Kurtz? And the photojournalist is like, you don't talk to him. You listen, but you don't talk to him. And that's a great line of understanding the dynamic between the people and Kurtz in this area where he speaks, nobody ever talks to him, but everybody obeys and listens to every word.
And he calls him a genius multiple times, the photojournalist. But also what's really interesting, in the classified files that Willard picked up at the circus war zone area, in that file was some more classified information. Some of it was, he's not the first person that's been hired to go kill Kurtz. Another assassin from the army was sent to kill Kurtz, and he went missing. And he's there. He has turned into a disciple of Kurtz, and there are a couple other American soldiers who are also disciples of Kurtz. And at first they're welcome to enter this area, and Hopper, the photojournalist, says, just run your siren. Like, hit him with your siren. And then they hit the siren on the boat, and all the native locals, they run away. They're able to enter safely for now. But they enter, and it's so interesting to see that there are other American soldiers who are clearly officers, probably, in addition to, like, Willard is, that are now turned into disciples for Kurtz.
And I like the one you mentioned earlier, the guy who was assigned to this mission earlier. Willard walks up to him, recognizes him, and the guy just stares at him, and he's like stroking his gun, and there's a scalped head attached, hanging to the rifle.
Yeah,
it's like, holy fuck! This happened to the guy that was the last guy they sent to kill Kurtz. What the hell is going on here?
It's really interesting. We don't see Kurtz at first, and obviously Willard's taken into custody, but Kurtz knows right away that this man was sent to kill me. And Willard doesn't try to hide that.
Also, the dead bodies are just everywhere.
Yeah.
They're hanging, they're lying, they're stacked, they're all over the place.
And again, these are real dead bodies.
It's crazy they use real dead bodies. So what's so fascinating about Kurtz is Kurtz knows that he's sent here to kill him, but in a way, ultimately with the end of the film, he just let him kill him. And so I think that deep down, Kurtz wanted to die and end it all. And so I think he allowed... The way I look at the film is he allowed Willard to kill him.
Ultimately. Oh, absolutely. I feel like he's just, at the end of the film, sort of just waiting for it to end, waiting for Willard to come and kill him. Maybe sort of to make him a martyr in a way for these people, but also just to end his life because maybe Kurtz knows he's gone too far and that there's no going back. He can't go home. He can't go back to his son, who he's tried to explain what's happened because obviously the army has labeled him a murderer. He can't go back to his normal life. And maybe because he's so far gone into his own mythos of him being a god and this god complex that he just wants it to end. And maybe he's brainwashed himself where if I die, I'll become a god.
Yeah, maybe. And Willard does have trouble even thinking about killing him because he does find himself fascinated by Kurtz and struck by him. And at first, Kurtz imprisons him, holds him captive for a little bit. And Willard told Chef, if I'm not back in 2,200 hours, call an airstrike on the area. And then when Kurtz is in prison and tied up, when Willard's tied up, Kurtz drops Chef's severed head on his lap, which is shocking. It's so shocking. Comes out of nowhere. And so there's no way for him to get out of this. But then Kurtz frees him. And then Willard says he spent a few days just wandering around, listening, just being there, just being present, being in Kurtz's presence. And in a way, it was alluring. And he probably became very close to being completely intoxicated like the previous assassin was. So he probably almost crossed that line.
I think so, too. Because like he said in the beginning of the film, he wasn't sure what he'd do when he met Kurtz. It's sort of like he wanted to hear him out, to understand why he went AWOL and why this person who has such a great pedigree, the most insanely absurd, perfect resume in the army, would cause him to go this way. And there's a really interesting story that Kurtz tells Willard, and it's about how when he was in Special Forces, he went to Vietnam, and one of their missions was to inoculate a village and to give them vaccinations. So they do it to everyone in the village and all the kids. And then an old man went blind because of the vaccine, the inoculations. And so what happened was they drove the army out, and then they cut off all of the arms, the left arms of all the children, because that's where they received the injections. And then Kurtz remembers seeing a pile of little arms. And that's probably the first instance of him starting to go mad with the horror of war, the horrors of humanity, the horror. He says it multiple times in this film, that quote from T.S. Eliot. And I think basically from there, that's when he becomes intoxicated with what can happen here. He's seen how far human beings can go, what they're capable of doing. What could he be capable of doing? Could he take advantage of being a force of power or a powerful being inside this area, inside this war zone?
I mean, in a way, he's become his own like version of a government or of a military leadership in a way.
Dictator.
Yeah, a dictator in a way. Although the people worship him, so there's
Well, that's what a lot of dictators or emperors were. They were worshipped as gods.
Yeah. That's a good point.
So that's really kind of what he becomes. These people worship him. They're his children. They carry out his missions. They carry out his assassinations. Clearly, it looks like they kill anyone who doesn't abide by his rules and his laws. And the ending is wild. It's a crazy crosscut where Willard, obviously the most iconic moments of the film, maybe the most iconic shot of him covered in mud and just slowly creeping out of the water. One of the best shots
with the fog.
Yeah, it's incredible. Great. I love that poster as well. And sneaking into the temple to kill Kurtz, but this is all cross-cut with the slaughter of a water buffalo. Now, this is a controversial scene because this is a real water buffalo that was killed. Yeah. Clearly, when you're watching this, that buffalo is alive, and they cut its head off. Now, Coppola did not do this. The production did not do this. The cast and crew did not kill this water buffalo. The water buffalo was slain as an annual ritual and sacrifice of the local people. This is what they do every year. It's a celebration, a feast, and they kill and sacrifice a water buffalo, which they consume. And so they filmed production. They finished filming. They finished the production. And Coppola basically said they're going to have this celebration and we're going to film it and just pick up the shots of it happening. And then they cross-cut it really interestingly with the sacrifice and slaughter of Kurtz by Willard.
They were actually able to get away with it because it wasn't filmed in America. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't have been able to film something like that in America.
There's clearly animal abuse in this movie. I mean, what happens to the puppy is really hard to watch as well because the puppy is pulled from hands to hands, and it clearly looks like it hurt the puppy as well. And there's another animal that looks like it was hurt in this movie too.
The American Humane Association gave the film an unacceptable rating.
Well, I mean, they cut off a buffalo's head, so yeah.
Pretty unacceptable.
They'll give you an unacceptable if you step on an ant.
But it's such a... Oh my God, what an amazing edit of cross-cutting between Willard slaughtering Kurtz and then the tribe slaughtering that water buffalo. Cutting back and forth with that crazy music from the Doors. It's just, it's so powerful and it's so incredible to behold. Like, obviously, the Godfather cross-cutting is just infamous. But this one's just as striking, I think, and just as powerful.
It is, and the ending is really interesting. And I know not a lot of people love the ending of this movie. They might feel a little unfulfilled. After, obviously, Willard has killed Kurtz with the machete, and now he's leaving this temple in the morning. He's carrying a collection of Kurtz's writings, and everyone eventually starts to worship him now. They bow to him. Yeah. And they drop their weapons in front of him as he passes.
Because he dropped his weapon. So he dropped the machete, and so they all imitated him.
And then he grabs Lance, who is clearly just blended into this temple and the society because he's just lost everything. His mind's gone. He's just, I'll blend in here. This seems good to me. And then they board that ship, the PBR, and they head back downriver and away from the mountain guards. And that's how the movie ends. And I think it's really interesting, really fascinating because he killed their god, and now he's become God.
He could have been their new god.
And you can see the temptation in his eyes. He's looking at this crowd worshiping him and waiting for him to say something or do something, and he rejects it.
Yeah, I love the ending because he could have done what Kurtz was doing. And like you said, you can in Martin Sheen's face, you see that in his mind, he's like, I could stay here, but then he chooses not to. And in a way, he shows that he's much different from Kurtz, and he came close, but he'll never become like a monster like Kurtz was.
Yeah. And again, Kurtz let Willard kill him. He doesn't fight back. He's expecting it in a way. Like I said, I think he wanted it. And like you said, he wanted it as well.
I think he was just like, he would have even let the other guy kill him. The previous assassin. Mm-hmm. He would have let him kill him, but the assassin just like was like, you know what? I'm going to follow you instead.
It's interesting. So he captures his assassins and then entices them as maybe sort of a test to see if you'll join me or not. And then obviously Willard doesn't accept it. He's tempted but doesn't accept, and kills the god.
The cinematography is so incredible, and like we said earlier, they lit the scenes with Brando to specifically hide his size. And then, but one of my favorite shots is there's this just thin ray of light on Brando, and this is when he's playing with his shaved head, running his hand up and down it. And my God, that's just like one of the most stunning shots I've ever seen. And so much of the cinematography with Brando is just incredible. Like, they just lit these scenes, and they were just like, Brando does his thing. And I'm sure they didn't know what he was going to do, which is probably super scary when filming it. But man, it is absolutely glorious to behold, the cinematography and lighting of these scenes.
This whole movie is glorious to behold. It's so well made. The production is astounding, jaw-dropping multiple times, show-stopping performances from Brando and Martin Sheen, and possibly career bests for both of them. And I really love Apocalypse Now. I haven't seen it in quite a while. It's been at least 5 or 6 years since I've watched this film. And I remember I watched it a lot when I was a teenager. It was one of those war movies that I was really into. I watched it like every year. But then I think I'd only seen it a couple times in my 20s. I don't think I've watched it since I turned 30, but you know, I have a huge appreciation for the filmmaking now, which I always did, but I think it's just astounding. And of all the movies I've watched this year, whether they're repeat viewings or first-time viewings or new releases, this is like top 5 of what I've seen this year.
Yeah, it might be the best movie I've seen this year.
Possibly.
I watch it every year.
It's so
I actually
so
watched
good.
it this year already.
I see clips, and it's obviously referenced a lot in social media and in the film world, in the film Twitter, the film TikTok space.
I recommend, if anyone who's seen this one, to watch the Redux. It's not as strong, but it's really cool to see that extra 50 minutes of footage. It's interesting.
It's arguably the best war movie of all time. It's up there. It's like this and Saving Private Ryan for me, personally.
Paths to Glory, man. Watch Paths to
Glory.
Glory. Get it on your watch list.
On the watch list. The never-ending watch list. It's sensational. It's incredible. I can't, like, when I watch this movie, I can't believe that Coppola pulled it off.
Can't believe he did it, man.
Can't believe it.
it.
And again, he owns this movie outright.
That's crazy.
It's not owned by a studio.
Wow.
Because no one wanted to fucking make this movie. No one wanted to be a part of it. No one wanted to give him money. But he got funding from a couple different sources, and obviously, like we said, he put up so much of his own. It's nuts.
Then he made The Godfather 3 because he needed to.
I'm
broke.
I need that money.
I'm broke.
He's like, I broke even at first. I'm sure he's made plenty of money since.
Oh yeah, he
with
just
rentals and
funded a $100 million movie himself.
No, but I mean just off of this movie.
Oh, this movie's very successful.
Yeah, now like streaming and VOD and rentals, DVD, VHS, everything.
It's up there with DVD sales. It's got to be.
It must have been a huge hit at Blockbuster and VHS as well.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure, bro.
A shout. Also, you can only rent it online, so he's still making money off of it.
Still make money off of it. It was a gamble, and it almost killed him. And it took him about 5 years to get this movie developed and made and released. He was attached to it in 1974, released it in 1979.
Wow.
Production began in 1976. Insane.
He's a filmmaker that when he has, like, some filmmakers with Final Cut doesn't quite work. Some filmmakers it does. And then he's a filmmaker where it's like when he has Final Cut, like, he makes things that like nobody else could have ever perceived. And no studio, like, this whole movie, if a studio was in control, would have been like, no, absolutely not. Don't do that. You can't do that. No. But he just did his thing, and he made something that's still so special.
It really is. It really is. It's going to be an all-timer forever. Well, you got anything else on Apocalypse Now?
That's it, man.
All right,
that was a big one.
That was. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to our episode on Apocalypse Now on Raiders of the Lost Podcast. Again, you can support the show by, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment. If you're watching or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening, leave a review or a 5-star rating. It really helps us get seen, and become a patron at patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast. Take care, everybody.
See you next time.
This episode was executive produced by our chosen one patrons, Cody Moen, Andrew Hagan, Becca Keene, Benjamin Cook, Calvin Murphy Griggs, Nicholas Martin, Darian Singleton, Tyler McFly, Andrew Hagan. Our chosen one patrons are our biggest supporters. Thank you so much. Raiders of the Lost Podcast is a mirror image production. Sound mixing done by Jacob Kossler. Opening music by Chase Jackson.